Hello guys, and welcome to the Blueprint in Practice, the video series where I show exactly how I implement the blueprint in real life. And if you're not aware, if you're new here, the blueprint is essentially probably the simplest approach to fitness on the internet. And it's the approach I follow and have followed for years at this point in some shape or form. If you're interested and you haven't read it, you can check it out in the description. It's free. But today's workout, and it is as always. So luckily this time I have I have gotten a couple of questions. But first I'm just gonna touch on how the situation is looking with the training. So as you know, we only do chin-ups, push-ups, and squats here. And in this video, I'm able to do 6 reps just as last time. And progression, strength progression, especially if you get past a certain point in terms of advancement, you know, when you've been training for years like me, progress is just going to be super slow. And it's basically impossible to make if you're not in a bulk. So if you're not in a calorie surplus, which I am at the moment, so I'm bulking at the moment. But next week, I'm perhaps looking at adding maybe one more rep, but I doubt it. I'm probably going to stay at 6 for a while. And then I think I'm just going to train up to 10 reps with the 15 kilos or 35 pounds on the weight vest. And then I'm going to add 5 kilos or 10 pounds more. And then just going to progress that way. But again, it doesn't really matter how you choose to do it. But what's running in the background at the moment is obviously my warm-up, where I just do like easier versions of the exercises I'm otherwise going to do. But the questions, and these questions are honestly pretty good. I'm surprised by the depth of the questioning here, if you could say it like that. But MGRP 1993 asks, first question: if someone started the blueprint, would you recommend them staying a rep or two from failure on each set of each exercise to avoid them getting too fatigued after just 1 or 2 circuits? If they go to absolute failure in each exercise, won't they be gassed after the first or second circuit and may struggle to do a third? And a circuit is just you doing a set of each exercise right after one another. So in this case, chin-ups, push-ups, and squats, and then resting. And that way you train way faster and you also train your cardio. So his question is essentially, should you go all the way to failure? But when I say train to failure in the blueprint or in these videos, what I mean is going to absolute failure. But your point, or what you think is your absolute point of failure, you know, when you go to a point where you just can't go any harder, that's not really your absolute point of failure. If someone put a gun to your head, you could probably do 1 or 2 reps more. So he asks if you should stay like 1 or 2 reps shy of failure, and you do that automatically. Like you stay 1 or 2 reps shy of absolute failure by going to absolute, what you think is your absolute point of failure. So I would always just train as hard as possible on every single circuit. And it's true in the beginning, if you're totally new, and this also goes in tangent with his second question, but I'm gonna get to that. You will perhaps run into a point, especially on the cardio side, where after 1 or 2 circuits, because training this way is obviously very intense when you do each exercise right after one another. So you might run into a point where your cardio especially is just hammered after like the second circuit or whatever. And if that's the case, just wait it out and wait a little longer and take a little more rest and then do your third set. There's no problem in doing that. Over time, you'll train up to a point where you're just where you can train like me, where you can bang all of them out at once without resting that much. And I don't know how quickly that'll come. That'll definitely come over time. And then you always want your strength to fail before your cardio. But yeah, that's really the way you train your cardio, is by training your cardio. So if you go to that point where you're super gassed or whatever, that's a good sign that you're actually pushing your cardio, and that means that over time it'll improve, right? But if you don't go to that point, nothing much will happen. Obviously, it's like your hypertrophy, I guess, and strength. Like if you don't push it to failure, it's just nothing much is going to happen, because it's not good enough a reason to do so. And the same applies to your second to third set. Like you are just always in terms of strength and hypertrophy, you're just never going to be able to do the same amount of reps as you will on your first set. Especially now if you train like me, where you go as hard as possible on your first set to test like how many reps you're able to do in terms of if you should add weight to the circuit or the sets or not. Then you are just going to be able to do less reps on your second and third set, and that's okay as long as you push to your point of failure. You should be good. Like you'll stimulate the muscles enough. That's what I do personally. And I mean, you could maybe keep a couple reps in reserve on the first set and save that energy for the second and third set. Fine, but that's not my way of training personally. But you could do that, I suppose. But maybe not really, because then you're not going to failure on the first set, are you? Just for the sake of simplicity, I would just always keep that in mind. Like go to failure and then just do as many reps as you can. Yeah, that's what I do personally. Number 2 question. Have you ever experienced overuse injuries due to the lack of variation and repetitive nature of doing the same exercises 3 to 5 times a week? Do you see this as a potential issue? And that's actually something I did write, that I had to write in the blueprint. So I intermediately update the blueprint, obviously. But apparently I didn't include that for some reason, because I have never personally experienced any issues when it comes to injuries ever. The only injury I've ever gotten was like 4 or 5 years ago when I just began working out and I did rack pulls. And if you don't know, rack pulls is essentially just like you doing the easiest portion of the deadlifts, so the most straight up portion, and then just loading that up super heavily. So I was super skinny and weak, and I went in and did like, I think over 100 kilos, or over 200 pounds for rack pulls. And then I fucking hurt my back doing that. But that's the only injury I've ever gotten. Nothing in relation to doing like chin-ups for fucking 4 or 5 years. I have never experienced any injuries. But it is true, you can get like golfer's elbow or tennis elbow or whatever. I've seen some videos with people who experience that, but I think it's all dependent on your genetics, but also how intensely you train, or how much volume you do to begin with. So if you're totally new, and this is also why I recommend total beginners to start with less training sessions a week. So start with like 2 or 3 sessions a week maybe, and then over the months add to 3 to 4 to 5. I'm doing five sessions a week typically. Because if you just go in super hard in the beginning, train to total failure, train like almost every day, like you're just going to increase your likelihood of running into issues like that. But over time, as you strengthen your body, your tendons and your joints are also going to strengthen themselves. And I suppose that's what's sort of happened to me. I've just been doing these exercises for so long that my body's just used to it, I guess. But yeah, if I were to go super hard on chin-ups every single day, like, I don't know, do 10 sets or something crazy, where it's like, I just do chin-ups all day, yes, I will definitely run into some issues there. But everything depends on, like, how hard you train, depending on how accustomed your body is to training, if you understand what I'm saying. So as a total beginner, take it a little easy, and you'll greatly decrease your likelihood of injury. That doesn't mean you shouldn't train to failure. That's still very important as a beginner for muscle hypertrophy and strength. But it just means that maybe train a little less often, right? And get a little more rest, recovery in between your sessions. That's what I would recommend anyway. And then over time, you can increase that, right? As you strengthen your muscles, your tendons, everything really. But yeah, I do see a potential issue but it's not an issue of doing the exercises repetitively per se. It's an issue of doing them too intensely, I think. But yeah, so those are great questions. If you have any questions like that, let me know and I'll include them in the next videos. But I think I'm almost finished working out. That's how fast it goes. So this is my last set, I believe. And yeah, I mean, if you watch these videos, you know that I just talk about the same stuff over and over again. So I just do, as these questions implies, that you do the same workout 4 or 5 times a week. And that's really the secret of getting results in the gym, is just to do the same things, I guess. You can also do different stuff if you want to, like if you don't want to keep it simple or whatever. And then you just do that. Like, it's training, eating, and sleeping, and then repeating that. Train, eat, sleep, repeat. Train, eat, sleep, repeat for years. That's literally it. That's what everyone does. If you look at anyone, that's the core of what everyone's doing. Here, in the blueprint, we're just only doing the core. We're only doing what matters. Whereas a lot of people do a lot of, I would say, unnecessary stuff on top of what actually works, which I'd argue is the core basics when it comes to training, is keeping things super simple, following a few simple rules when it comes to nutrition, and then just making sure you have a life where you can sleep at night. Like, that's very important for recovery and stuff. But I thought I'd just include, I forgot this last time, but the meals I've been eating, because there's a lot of talk of training and typically not a lot of talk about nutrition, but this is a typical meal, right? So eggs, meat, rice, etc. And this is what I eat for breakfast and lunch typically. And then, it's the same sort of meal. So it's some sort of carb, whether that's rice, pasta, bread, whatever, just some sort of whole grain carb source, some good carb source, some meat, some eggs, and some vegetables. If you really want to be simple about it, you can probably maybe just eat rice and meat. Some bodybuilders do that, which is quite funny. But because it's a delicious meal, I could see myself eating that forever. But that's sort of what you eat. Like, you just eat. Make sure to include some carb source, some protein, some veggies, and some healthy fats or something, like some cooking oil or something like that. People talk about seed oils being bad. I don't know about that. But look, the Physique Check, and I mean, you don't want things to change dramatically from session to session. That's something to keep in mind. Like, you want the bulk in this case, which I'm doing, to be very slow. So you basically don't want to be able to see a difference from time to time, because ideally I'd only have gained like 250 grams of mass each week, which is what we're doing. We're doing weekly updates, right? So you want to gain like a kilo or 2.2 pounds a month, and that's barely even noticeable at a monthly interval. So you shouldn't really be able to see that big a difference. I've gained around a little over 2 kilos since I began the bulk a couple of months ago, so that's perfect. And I've been that accurate, which actually sort of surprises me a little bit, because usually it's not that accurate. By just eating intuitively, following the rules of the blueprint, right? So yeah. But that's it for today, I think. I think I'll answer questions. They took up quite a bit of space, didn't they? So I didn't really have any time to talk about the physique update, but I guess there's nothing really new to say there. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode.